Hey guys, what's up and welcome back. I have had to remake all of my videos from scratch after losing everything because I formatted the hard drive, unfortunately. So you'll notice everything's kind of changed a little bit. Everything looks a little bit different, hopefully for the better. Now let's get on with it because update 2.10, top picks is my first video back after recreating stuff. We're going to start in the lane, as usual, Vox. This guy is not going to go away. He has got a kit that is incredible for a carry. He's super mobile, his build paths are cheap, and he deals a lot of damage. Now, remember, these are just sample builds. You can alter them as you like. Obviously, these aren't necessarily the best builds for Vox. Here, I'm just throwing out some builds that work well for him. The top build, you read from left to right. If you read downwards, it's because you're replacing an item. We're going to look at the next pick, BLACKFEATHER. He's very flexible. You'll see him in both my lane and my jungle picks. BLACKFEATHER, very, very good right now. Traditionally, in the lane, you'll see him as weapon power, and coming out the jungle, you'll see him as CP. But BLACKFEATHER still is good, even despite the hundreds of nerfs SCMC is throwing his way, kind of as well as Vox. This guy is not going to go away anytime soon. Standard build is the Serpent's Mask breaking point, and then everything after that you kind of can make your own decision on. I like Sorrow Blade as I think it's statistically the best damage output, but also if I'm facing up against a lot of armor, I also like Bonesaw. We'll come back to the CP build when we get to the jungle. Now, I ignored this guy for a couple of patches, but Saw is in a good position right now. He is a bit of a solo queue monster. If you're good against a laner that isn't particularly good in lane and you know how to stutter step with Saw, he can be really overpowering in his weapon power form. He had a nerf in the previous update, not enough really to set him back a huge amount. He's still vulnerable to the same things he was vulnerable to before. A good coordinated team can shut down a Saw, but I've seen so many good Saws in solo queue. The Sorrow Blade double Tyrant's Monocle build, maybe even triple Tyrant's Monocle build, is still very good on him. Now this one might come into you as a surprise. RONA is coming into my lane picks. She's really solid right now. Not only does she counter a lot of the other good laners, post level 6 does okay into Saw, she does well into BLACKFEATHER. She's also just a safe pick in general and can it's very hard to shut her down. She builds similar to weapon power BLACKFEATHER, Serpent's Mask into breaking point. Then I also like to, like I said, finish up with Sorrow Blade, but you can sub that out for a Bonesaw if you need to get through a lot of armor. So RONA coming in as my final pick in the lane. Let's start to move towards jungle picks. Alpha. Now, Alpha is still in a good position, despite having a 1% nerf on Aftershock. Oh my god, 1%. She's still a really solid jungler, especially CP. I think that the standard build for her is the Aftershock into Dragon's Eye. Then your third item is really up to you. If you need to start getting through lots of shield, I would recommend Broken Myth. If you need the sustain, go for Eve of Harvest. And Clockwork is just generally a good item on Alpha right now. Weapon power build, you can see you don't traditionally build Alpha weapon power, but if you want to, it is there for you to try out. Going into the jungle now, something that has been out of meta, but really kind of always floating around as a pick. Skye definitely coming back into her own this update. Really, really powerful, especially if you get her to 3 or 4 items, especially on the CP build path. And again, her item builds vary quite frequently, but you often make a choice between the Dragon's Eye, the Shatterglass, and the Frostburn. Frostburn is actually coming back as a viable item, so keep your eye on that, especially because it works really well against some of these heavy melee laners like BLACKFEATHER and also like RONA and so on and so forth. I told you this guy would feature again. BLACKFEATHER is just so good right now. He is in both the lane and the jungle picks. He's really flexible, and his CP build path in the jungle is generally what you tend to see. Now, the old build for him was the Shatterglass, the Broken Myth into an Eve of Harvest, but the Eastern Asian meta kind of brought across this Aftershock build where you can go Aftershock into Broken Myth, and then you again have that choice between Eve of Harvest or Clockwork. So I'd thoroughly recommend that you try out both of them and see which ones that you end up using and which ones you like. Again, the final pick in the jungle here is KRUL. Now, there are a lot of good jungle picks right now. I could have included Reza, I could have included Batiste, but KRUL is just really versatile, and he's very good at shutting down opposition junglers. You can build KRUL in double weapon power compositions really nicely because how well he synergizes with Bonesaw. He just loves everything that Bonesaw provides for him. So, again, a couple of sample builds. The Critical Strike build is something that I wouldn't recommend, but you can try it out. Safe builds for KRUL are Poison Shiv into Breaking Point or Poison Shiv into Bonesaw. And then you can add a Sorrow Blade on the end if you want. Those are the safe builds. Again, I really do recommend that you just try out builds and see how you do with them. I'm also going to do best builds for this update later next week. Let's move on to the captains. Lance, I think, is in a really good spot right now. He's really good at setting up ganks. He's good at putting pressure on melee laners like BLACKFEATHER and RONA, especially early on. So you can kind of snowball the lane quite nicely having a Lance on your team. So I really like Lance at this point in time. I think he's a good captain all round. This one might surprise you. He's generally better in coordinated teams, so maybe not so much for solo queue, but I do really like Churnwalker at the moment. He's very hard to kill. Obviously, it's a lot easier to hit chains against heavy melee compositions, and again, we are starting to see a lot more melee compositions come out with the likes of KRUL, RONA, BLACKFEATHER, Reza, so on and so forth. So, you know, Churnwalker is going to find more and more power in those kind of compositions because it's easier for him to stay in the mix and easier for him to get those chains attached. So I really like Churnwalker right now. Very, very strong captain. ARDAN, despite the nerf, is still good. Still in a good position. He's the real captain dad. Just kind of does a bit of everything. Protect, he attack, he does everything. So I like ARDAN. I still think he's in a good position. You might wonder why these builds are being flashed up exactly the same. That's because realistically, in my opinion, the only two items that are absolutely necessary for captains at the moment are Fountain and War Treads. Everything else is flexible, and everything else is up to you. I think Echo on a lot of captains like ARDAN is a necessary item too, but other than that, it's kind of depending on what you're facing up against. So it's a flexible set of builds coming up for captains, so I encourage you to build appropriately for the situation. Lyra, she's in a really good position still. Like the health changes, she didn't really receive many nerfs on the last update, and she's still in a good position. So Lyra is very, very good. Some of you might be wondering, where's Lorelei? Lorelei is good, but she's banned so often right now, and she's such a new hero and I think very hard for the average player to make work properly, that I would recommend staying away from Lorelei until you've had a bit more practice on her. So I'm not going to recommend her this update, but do realize that I have got my eyes on Lorelei. I think she's a very, very good pick right now. As is Catherine. Really, Catherine hasn't really dropped off, but I'm just decided not to include her in my list this time round. So hopefully you've enjoyed this sort of return to video making. I've had to make everything from scratch. I'm sorry I didn't put them in order. I will put them in order in the future as we go through the next updates. It's just this time round I was working from scratch, and this is the best I could rustle up. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you soon.